Our presentation for today is from Wendy Rihner. It's called From Loathsome Harlotry to DNA, Plant Taxonomy is Not Nerdy. This is something that I've been requesting for a while now because when I started Wild Ones, I knew a little bit about plant taxonomy, but when I started running the chapter, it just went all out of my head. So I need this badly. So Wendy Rihner, a retired Delgado Community College English professor, started birding in 1997, but had yet to make a connection between birds and native plants. It was not until 2015 that she made that connection after watching ruby-throated hummingbirds feed on red buckeye trees, the red buckeye trees of Longview House and Gardens. Rihner has been making up for lost times ever since, gardening with natives and even growing them. Her small seasonal business, Bird Girl Blooms, grows native plants and sells them from February through April and donates all profits to the Orleans Audubon Society's Birds for Plants mission. She chairs this mission and is also the education chair for them. She is also a founding board member of Wild Ones Pontchartrain Basin chapter, where she helps bring Wild Ones advocacy message to the eastern part of St. Tammany, which we're very happy for and we're growing. We're starting to spread into the eastern part of the parish. We're spreading into Washington Parish. We're spreading into Tangipahoa Parish. We're on the move. So thank you, Wendy. Please come up. All right.
Welcome, everybody. Thank you for coming, and I'd like to welcome all of you on this journey with me. As Patty told you, I'm a retired Delgado College professor, but even though I spent my whole life in academia, we always have to make sure that people know we're experts. That's a big thing. I am going to tell you the opposite. I am not an expert. As I said to you before, I only know about a quarter, if that much, of plant taxonomy. But it is so very interesting, and I want to tell you why, A, I'm on this journey, and B, I hope you also come along with me on this journey. We are at a serious crossroads in our plant conservation consideration, what have you. We're going to talk a lot about percentages, and for example, 34% of North America's native plants will be extinct in our lifetimes, not in our grandchildren's lifetimes, not 20 years from now, but maybe by next week some of these plants will go extinct. So I'm very concerned about that. And as one of my friends, she and I always are speaking, and I'm always telling her, we have to get our noses out of the garden, if only just for temporarily, to see what's going on outside of the garden. Okay, so while I agree with Doug Tallamy that we all need to make our yards national parks, that's not going to solve the biodiversity crisis only. So come along with me. We'll talk a little bit. Folks, I have to use notes because my brain is not as plastic anymore, so I hope that does not offend you that I will be using notes. So let's see. All right, so first of our agenda, we're going to go through some definitions that may or may not be familiar with you. And if you are familiar with them, thank you. And if I make a mistake, please correct me. Okay, because that's always a possibility. Brief history of taxonomy and its champions. We're going to go through the Linnaean binomial system, which is very important. Speaking Latin with no worries, and that's the handout I have divvied up. And I apologize, I don't have a handout for everybody, but you know what? Making copies is pretty expensive. It's like 90 cents a pop. What happened to the days of 6 cents at Kinko's, right? Why taxonomy matters for gardeners and other citizen scientists, and yes, those of you who are master naturalists, I want to say natural masters, master naturalists, I'm looking at you. This is why taxonomy matters. And then where is taxonomy today? Because there is a lot of controversy about taxonomy. First of all, before we do anything, this is a book I suggest you all purchase and read, simply because it's a very good read and it's scientific, but it's not wonky. It's very accessible. Her writing is very fluid. Erin Zimmerman is Canadian, if I'm not mistaken. I know she was working at Montreal, at a university in Montreal. And she's written this book about what is happening in colleges and universities with taxonomy, because folks, let's face it, that's where most of taxonomical studies took place, was in the academic world. Yes, it's taking place in botanical gardens, and thank God for botanical gardens, because they are still sending out taxonomists into the field. But she's also writing from a woman's perspective. Botany, taxonomy, not terribly open to women over the centuries, as you can imagine. She eventually left her studies because of some things like having a child that does change things, but also some of the misogyny and some of the technology that's just overwhelming what we're going to be able to call, with fluidity today, with fluence today, we're going to call it classical taxonomy. So this is a really good book, and it's now in paperback because it is about 7 years old. So let's get technical, some definitions. So taxonomy is that science that explores, describes, names, and classifies organisms. In our case, all of our organisms are going to be plants. Okay, so taxonomy does all of that. You go out and you see, oh, that's a plant I've never seen before. You know, you have to check all the records. You have to write a very thorough description of it. It gets named, and then we classify it. Nomenclature is that formal, very rule-based system of naming organisms, and in our case, plants, for clarity. Okay, so, and believe me, there are some serious rules about nomenclature. Morphology is identifying the physical form or the external structure and developmental history of plants. And morphological taxonomy was the practice until 1993-ish. That's what we had been doing for centuries before the early 1990s. Systematics is kind of what we're doing now. It's determining the evolutionary relationships of plants through molecular sciences, you can't even say that, DNA strands, all that kind of stuff. It's done in a lab. So what they do is they go to herbariums, and I believe, I forgot to check this out, but Tulane had a really good herbarium, but last I heard they were giving parts of it away. They don't have the money, or I can be cynical, they don't have the willpower to keep the herbarium in. But scientists will go to these herbarium sheets, they'll go and pull out a sheet for some particular plant, and that's what they study. Angiosperms, we should all know that, right? Those of you who are master gardeners, you know what an angiosperm is. It's a flowering plant, right? Any plant that flowers is an angiosperm. Phylogenetics is a study of evolutionary history and relationships between organisms, and that's what they're doing with the molecular science. And that's why some of you are a little bent out of shape like I was when we saw hibiscus change. We're going to talk about that, okay? So these are just some of the definitions, and of course there are hundreds of others, but we don't have all day. So the basic components of taxonomy is, you know, you describe this plant, its features. Anyone want to take a guess where most of the rare plants in this country, not in Canada, but in this country, anyone know which state has probably most, and botanists call these plants missing because they haven't been found. Where do you think, which state do you think this is, where these plants are missing, have yet to be discovered? It's out west. Big. California. California has the most native plant species in the country. It's huge. Why? Why? because it's got ecosystems out the yin-yang, right? There are so many different ecosystems in California. So botanists think that many of these plants are in desert areas, maybe on the border of Mexico, so they're looking for them. So that description is going to keep going on. 15% of United States plants have yet to be described. Okay, identification then is a process where you either associate this plant with something that's already known, or you try to determine if it's unknown and does it need a formal description. And folks, by the way, botanists can take up to 10 years to write and publish, because it has to go out to all the journals, their formal description of a plant. And then nomenclature is that formal naming of a plant according, it's no longer the International Botanical Code of Nomenclature. They've changed it to the International Code of Nomenclature, and nomenclature for algae, fungi, and plants. Are there any young people here? Because we're going to have to probably ask them to leave the room. Okay, no, I don't see any. How do we deal with a guy like Linnaeus? Remember, what do you do with something about Maria? What do you do with a guy like Linnaeus? His system was artificial, to be sure. All right. So in his essay, Introduction to the Betrothal of Plants, was Linnaeus's way of telling us that love comes even to the plants. He writes, the flower's leaves serve as bridal beds, which the Creator has so gloriously arranged and perfumed with so many soft scents that the bridegroom with his bride might there celebrate their nuptials with so much greater solemnity. When now the bed is so prepared, it is time for the bridegroom to embrace his beloved bride and offer her his gifts. I think he had something else going on there, okay? So what Linnaeus did was he looked at the sex organs of plants, the pistils, the stamens, and he came up with a system of arranging 24, and if you flip to the last sheet of your handout, you will see the arrangement of, this is partly the arrangement of these sex organs. Okay. So the moralist, the Scottish moralist, and also a botanist in Scotland, who is a contemporary of Linnaeus, says his system is too smutty for British ears. So if you look at, I'm sorry if you can't read my handwriting, but the first one he called Monandia, one pistil, one stamen, one husband, one wife. The next one, Diandria, 2 husbands in the marriage bed and 1 wife. It gets racier. If you look down to letter G, Heptandra, right? How many? Hept is what? And 1 wife? That sounds like a Bourbon Street party. I don't know what else you can say. And to the point where he gets down, way down to the bottom, this is probably, if this wasn't bad enough. I mean, imagine you're a Puritan in the 18th century, and you see this man saying that, okay, some flowers have sex organs where there is a bed for you and a bed for me. Those of us who've been married long enough know how that is so true. But, so that's one arrangement. Another arrangement is, the next one, is that there is a different house for both. That happens too, as well. But the next one really probably would have gotten my knickers all bunched up if I were alive back then, is you have a husband, his wife, and his concubines, all in one flower. Okay, so this is totally an artificial system. It was an attempt at doing it. No one takes this seriously anymore. It's not even referenced, and I think not soon after, probably I would venture a guess that Linnaeus knew he was a little hoo-hoo with that. But anyway, so Johann Sigesbeck was a German botanist, and this is where loathsome harlotry comes. He wrote, a contemporary of Linnaeus, such loathsome harlotry as several males to one female would never have been permitted in the vegetable kingdom by the Creator. So this caused quite a bit of a stir. So that you, please keep this from your grandchildren. We don't want them to get any strange ideas. Okay. It you can imagine how humans are. Look, we're all the same over centuries. There was an interest in arousing, oh, I'm sorry, that bad choice of words. There's an interest in arousing botany, and this, people theorize maybe that's why he went this way. And the other thing that arranging plants by this way maybe turn women off, because you don't want your daughter where this lewd and licentiousness is, and then they won't pursue this. Because remember, women always like to look out at plants, and that might be one reason why this was. Darwin's grandfather, Erasmus Darwin, was so titillated by this sexual system of plant organs that he wrote a book of love poems based on it. And yes, you can buy that book, and the poems are woo out there. Okay, so you think we're weird today? All right. Oh, and here's John Ray again. Okay, this man, A.P. Kundal, look, we're jumping even farther ahead. 1813 gave us the name taxonomy, and he said plants need to be arranged by their anatomy, not by their function, not by their chemical physiology, nothing, by their anatomy. He came up with taxonomy based on the Greek, taxis, nomos, and we can thank this gentleman for coming up with the first rules of nomenclature known internationally, which is now Code of Nomenclature for Algae, Fungus, and Plants. So, and he also studied the idea of I can never say this, allelopathy. So I have the good fortune, because my husband's employed by Glacier National Park, I spend some of my summer up in Montana, and they are having a serious problem with spotted knapweed, which is from Eurasia. It's an invasive, but it also is a plant that is allelopathic. It can shoot out substances from its roots and kill off everything else around it. He did not have the technology to come with what it's called or all that good stuff, but we do attribute that to him, and that's a very important thing. So he also is very important, and he also is urging a more natural system of organization. Thank God, other than the previous one we looked at. So where are the women? Where are the women? There are lots of women. I know some of you have probably heard of that German woman, I think her name was Maria Marian. She studied butterflies. This woman in the 1800s went down to South America to study the relationship between plants and butterflies. Elizabeth Blackwell, a British woman, was the first woman to give a plant a binomial name in 1757. And then Jane Colden, who's becoming a subject I'm very interested in. She was the first American woman to document North American native flora in the Flora of New York. In fact, she caught Linnaeus in misidentifying something. Yay for her. You go, girl, right? So she had I think by 1754, she had like 100 species of natives identified in New York. And then just a few years later, her book came out and it had like 300 species. You can actually buy her botanic book if you're interested. I also have this little biography, which is very slim, as you can tell, on her if you're interested in taking a look at that. And also I have an article about her, which is really fascinating, that you can download from the internet. So if you're interested in taking a look at those, let me know. Okay? Okay, so let's take a look at the Linnaean binomial system. Remember, binomial, scientific name, Latin name, these all can be used interchangeably. You go to Bird Girl Blooms, you buy a plant, you pull out the tag, and it says, Gaillardia estivalis. What in the world? Okay, so this is our genus, and the genus is always going to be capitalized, always, unlike the species that is not going to be capitalized. So the genus is kind of like your surname, and there are thousands of genera out there. The species starts with that lowercase. And what do you see the similarity here? What's that? Italicized. Scientific names are always italicized. If you don't want someone in the plant world biting your head off, don't write it without italics, okay? Don't type it without italics. And the species name is like your given name. So it'd be Rihner Wendy. That, my plant would be Rihner Wendy. And then, so the species, we also call this the epithet, the specific epithet, could be a geographical location, like Tradescantia ohioensis. Where did that come from? You know that, right? It could be a plant's characteristics. It could be the name of the discoverer. So you want to pay attention to that epithet, to the entire scientific name. So thank you, dirty old man, for giving us this, because this is what we're using right now, right? Okay, so let's give credit where credit is due. So this is a great North Shore plant. Charles E. Chickadee natives sold them for years, these plants. Unfortunately, I didn't put a picture up there. But Baldwina uniflora, so obviously the genus here, okay, is capitalized. Uniflora, not capitalized, but all in italics. Then you get this, right? So if you were the great author, if you were the person to have found this plant, you get the name, okay? And you get you're the discoverer, excuse me. You get the authorship of it. So Nuttall here, Thomas Nuttall, is a huge name in science. He was an ornithologist, 19th century ornithologist. He was a botanist. There's a Nuttall's woodpecker in California, Nuttall's this, Nuttall's that, everything. So NUTT obviously represents him. And you notice it is not italicized. The age of the sixth extinction. Okay, Louisiana, from top to bottom, west to east, has 400 to 500 rare, endangered, threatened plants. Does anyone want to take a guess what the two most endangered, most threatened plants in Louisiana are? Bald cypress is doing pretty darn well. It's in Abbeville. Iris nelsonii, the red iris, not the copper-colored iris, the red iris in Abbeville. And the other one is one we're going to look at in a minute here, and it's on the North Shore. Okay, so novices, they can learn taxonomy and help them differentiate between a native and a native R, because we know that when you pull that tag at the nursery and it says Echinacea purpurea, purple explosion, they know right away, something's not right. There's no purple explosion on the end of this, and it's a straight native, right? It's a native R. It's been tampered with, so it blooms for 3 months instead of 3 weeks, or whatever geneticists wanted to do. If we know taxonomy, a particular family or a genus or a genera, we're more knowledgeable of that plant's strengths, weaknesses, limitations. For example, is a plant susceptible to mealybugs? In my informal research, have found that Rudbeckia hirta is susceptible, at least on the South Shore, to mealybugs. Mealybugs will come to that plant for some reason. I put some in my mother-in-law's house. She's got them. I don't understand. I don't know why. Plant rescues. We need people who know what they're looking at, okay? We need people who can say, oh yeah, that's a blah, 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 right? At least a genus, so that we know what it is that we're trying to rescue. Taxonomy can remove the stigma associated with some plants. Can you imagine Perinos, and I pick on Perinos, I don't mean to, but can you imagine Perinos selling sneezeweed? I don't think anybody, and I live in Metairie, so I can say, I live in Metairie part of the time, so I can say this, I don't think anyone in Metairie is going to buy sneezeweed. But they might buy if it has some other different name. Maybe if it's Helenium amarum and something else, they'll more likely to buy it. Knowing taxonomy is a great way to build memory skills. I don't know if any of you are having a problem with your brains becoming less plastic, like mine, and that's great. Also, when you're out hiking or enjoying the outdoors, so for example, this past summer, I was hiking with my husband in Montana, and I came upon this plant, and I said, oh my God, I know the genus, because I can tell the characteristics of this plant. It was a loco weed. okay? And Montana has quite a few species of loco weed. And I said, that's a loco weed. And how do you know? Well, because you can look at the bloom and blah, 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 and you can see the bloom. And sure enough, it was a new species in a genus for me, and I was very proud of myself. But then also, folks, again, this conservation thing is so important. Our gardens are important. Our gardens are vital, but we also need to look around us and see what's happening. But the number one reason, stop the confusion. There's so much confusion, too many common names. Plant names vary between regions, between ethnicities, between historical traditions. Okay, plant nurseries can give people exactly what they want. If they have this scientific name and you know it, you know exactly what that is. Footnote, look at this, folks. There are currently 1.4, give or take a few, million plant names, but there are only 350 to 360,000 plants in the world. What is going on? Each plant has 27 different names? Who is not going to be confused by that? This is a good example right here. This is a great native found in my home state of Ohio. It says marsh marigold. Oh, it's a marigold. It's an Asteraceae. Ranunculaceae is the family. So you'll know better how to take care of this plant if you know where it rests on the hierarchy. Okay? Okay, so let's take a quick game here. So, which plant do you want to start with? Anyone? Let's start with the one on my left, the white one. Okay, let's start with that white one. Penstemon digitalis, Latin name, right? Foxglove beard tongue, or if you don't like that, smooth white beard tongue. If you don't like that, Mississippi penstemon. You don't like that, white penstemon. Or you can just call it beard tongue. Or you can call it tall white beard tongue. Or you can call it talus slope beard tongue. Or you can call it white penstemon, smooth beard tongue, or Mississippi beard tongue. Good God. Okay, the middle. Let's take a look at that middle one, right? Monarda fistulosa, right? Monarda fistulosa. Bee balm, right. Purple bergamot. Wild bergamot, which is what they call it in Montana. Wild bee balm. Horse mint, they call it in Ohio. Mint leaf bee balm. Common wild bergamot. Purple bee balm, or if you're my friend in New York, it's Oswego tea. Whew. Okay, let's look at our friendly coneflower there. All right. Oh, this gets really weird. Kansas snake root. Purple coneflower. Eastern purple coneflower. And I think I know why that name came out. Hedgehog coneflower. Scurvy root. So if you're on a ship too long, folks, and you haven't any vitamin C, I guess you can go eat that. Echinacea. Purple rudbeckia. Indian head. I don't think we're going to be calling it that anymore. Coneflower or Samson root. I think it's called Eastern purple coneflower because in the state of Montana, they call Echinacea angustifolia, slender-leaved coneflower, they call that purple coneflower. So when I go to my favorite nursery up there, I'm like, that's not purple coneflower. Oh, yes, it is. Ooh, okay, well, it's not what it is back home. All right. And then this orange one, Asclepias, what? Tuberosa. Butterfly weed. How about this one? Gay butterflies. I don't think we're going to name it that anymore. Chigger flower. Common butterfly weed. Orange root. Indian paintbrush. No, that's not Indian paintbrush. If you've been to Texas or out west, you know that's not Indian paintbrush. Butterfly plant, flame weed, pleurisy root, orange milkweed, butterfly milkweed. Good case in point. Just too much confusion. Okay, and then so more urgent matters. I've already talked about the need for our work in helping natives. Now, there are differing, see, scientists have a hard time deciding what's extinct. They don't know what's extinct yet. So supposedly there is anywhere from 900 to 8,800 rare plants in our country, and only 9% are protected federally. And folks, I don't mean to say this, but the ESA, Endangered Species Act, is going to be gutted. Okay, it's coming down, it's gonna be gutted. And you know what? Coming from someone with experience this, everybody worries about the megafauna, the grizzlies, the deer, the elk, the antelopes, the moose, the whatevers. But they don't think of plants as worth saving. And I think that's really tragic. And that's why our gardens are so important. But this little plant, anyone know of this plant here? The Louisiana quillwort? Where is it found? What's that? Is it in Lake Ramsey? Oh, wow, great.
Lake Savannah.
Oh, yeah, right. In wet, right? It's wet. Cool plant. It's got like 4 chambers in its leaves. It's kind of floppy like a carex, and it's got like 4 chambers in its leaves that allow air because it's submerged a lot. This is the rarest quillwort in North America, is our very own. And Washington and St. Tammany parishes historically are where this was. Now, Mississippi has a few more populations, but ours are we're losing them. And why do you think we're losing this species in St. Tammany and Washington parishes? Okay, draining for agriculture, draining for houses, what have you. Botanists need us, and they need us to know some of this stuff. Okay, so quickly, what is taxonomy today? It's all working in a lab, study of classification of plants according to their evolutionary chain. They want to find the ancestor for all of these plants, and you can understand that. But the first 2 activities, exploring and description aren't necessarily done, but you can't do that in a lab, right? You don't know what's out there if you're in a lab. So this is kind of interesting. Aaron Zimmerman says the introduction of DNA sequence data has been called era splitting for taxonomy. We are now in the splitting era where, oh, this plant looks like it, but it's not the same plant, so we're going to divide it. Ornithology has already gone through that, okay? Western warbling vireo, Eastern warbling vireo. Used to be just warbling vireo, but they split it. There are lumpers and there are splitters, and we're now in the splitting. So brace yourselves, there are going to be a lot of changes coming up. Okay, don't look at this, you'll get a headache. I suffered a migraine trying to even look at this. This is what botanists do today in labs, whether those labs are at a college or whether those labs are in a botanical garden. It is the most, God-forsaken, okay? I mean, I don't even need to know that much. But anyway, so the new taxonomy is the APG system, the angiosperm flowering plants phylogeny group. All these researchers studying the molecular strands, the DNA, to figure out how these plants evolved and what their evolutionary relationship is. That's what it is. You don't see Mr. Botanist with his big floppy hat and bags going out and looking anymore. They're in labs. Okay, so they're looking at this stuff that way. And unless you have nothing to do and you want to go down this rabbit hole, go down it. You better have some Advil on hand because this is really, really difficult stuff. Okay, so recent changes that we heard of. Some of you saw on Facebook, on LNPS, Louisiana Native Plant. They have changed hibiscus. It is no longer hibiscus. Why? Because they found out that it didn't have a common ancestor. So they've moved it to a new group. And how many of you ever watched crime drama in the 90s, Homicide, Life on the Streets, with that guy, that character Munch? So that's how my mnemonic device, I just say Munch, okay? Munchusia coccineus, not hibiscus coccineus anymore. Now, is there going to be a police force out there with tasers to put John in prison because he said hibiscus instead of Munch? No, right? In fact, botany, botany will allow you to use synonyms, okay? The idea that an old name can become a synonym. Mimulus lewisii, monkey flower, that's what it used to be called, something totally different now. It's still lewisii, but the genus has changed. So you're going to see this. Now, I'm not so sure at Pelican what we're going to do. I don't think we're going to go around changing all the hibiscus tags, but you'll know that it's out there and it's coming, okay? So, in closing here, plant names need to be consistent. We need that, you need that, I need that. So the science is necessary. We do need men in lab coats, women in lab coats. We do need people looking through microscopes with their little turkey basters and all that kind of stuff. But it needs to be, I think, a combination. So universities are not training taxonomists anymore. And I hate to say the CC thing, but in the age of climate change, you know, they say for every degree Celsius of intensified heat, plants bloom 2.4 days earlier. So when we're seeing this and you think, wait a minute, my Verbena hastata never bloomed in April. Why is it blooming? You know these things. You know the family. You know what it's supposed to do. University budget cuts and funding shortages, all going to football teams, have simply stopped botanical research in the field and focused almost solely on molecular sciences because it is expensive to send Joe Blow out there with his little students there. Too many scientists are too dismissive. Let's face it, a lot of scientists love technology and they're into technology, and if Alex understands it, oh well, Alex, get over it, right? And there is kind of that in some, but they are dismissive of taxonomical field because it's dusty, it's outdated, and it's so much better that if we do this that we're doing now. It's somewhat bad that this woman, Soltis, who is a professor of natural history, we're losing, we continue to lose, and we've been losing for decades taxonomic expertise because people think it's old-fashioned and not important. According to the National Academy of Sciences, 15% of North American plant species have yet to be discovered. Well, who's going to discover them? A woman with a turkey baster in a lab at the University of Chicago? I don't think so. How our nursery is going to keep up with all the changes. Think about that. How our nursery is going to keep up with that. We just spent $500 on plant tags. Can threatened plant populations be saved in a lab? Yes, there is some good work being done in labs for plant conservation, but not solely by that. And then finally, the common consensus among botanists is that classical taxonomy, the morphology, studying a plant's characteristics, must continue with field work and molecular work if we are going to save plants from extinction. So, let's close with something from Aaron Zimmerman. The most astounding thing about taxonomy as a science is the yawning gap between how crucial it is to the enterprise of human knowledge and how valued it is in practice. Thank you very much.